guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chloe, if you are new here, and if you are, I would love you to hit that bright subscribe button down below. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate you giving it a big thumbs up. So today I have got for you another nursing video, and as always, it is sponsored by the lovely people over at Nurses.co.uk. They are a careers website built for nurses, by nurses, and on top of all the job opportunities they've got on their website, they've also got a load of fab blog resources. There's so much interesting information on their website. I actually contribute to some of their blog posts, but I also love reading some of the ones that are from sort of like general nurses and LD nurses, midwives, because I just love learning about different areas of nursing. So no matter whether you're a student or a qualified nurse, you will definitely find something interesting on there to read. So I will leave a link to both their website and all their blog stuff in the description bar down below. But today I wanted to talk to you guys about making that transition from a band 5 to a band 6 nurse. If you're new around here and you haven't seen one of my videos before, then hi, I'm Chloe and I am a mental health nurse, and I've been qualified for... How long have I been qualified for? Like 19 months? Yeah, like just over a year and a half, so like a year and 7 months. I honestly can't believe it's been that long, to be honest with you. Time flies when you're having fun, clearly. And I transitioned from band 5 to band 6 about coming up to 4 months ago now. And I just wanted to kind of have a chat with you guys about my experience of transitioning from a 5 to a 6, because I know it's something that a lot of students have in their head even before they're qualified. They're thinking about, well, once I've qualified, how am I going to keep progressing? The first thing I wanted to talk about is, how do you know when you are ready to be a band 6? Now, you will likely meet some nurses, particularly more of kind of like your old school nurses that have been qualified a really long time. And a lot of those sort of old school nurses will say that you need to be qualified, you know, at least 2 years or at least 3 years before you become a band 6. Because when they were students and newly qualified nurses, that's how it worked. Nowadays, I think it's quite different, and some people transition quite quickly from a 5 to a 6. And I'm not going to sit here and say either way is right or wrong. I think every nurse is completely different. And I also think it depends on what kind of band 6 position you're applying for. If it's more of a clinical 6, then potentially they are going to expect you to have been qualified longer, because it's kind of that clinical experience which you're needing. However, if it's more of a management-based band 6, then actually whilst experience plays into it, actually some people are just more management minded and are better set out for those management roles. So potentially you wouldn't have needed to be qualified as long if you're going into more of a management 6, if you are just kind of really good at that management side of things, than if you're going into a clinical 6, if that makes sense. So my band 6 role is a management band 6 role. I work within inpatient services. I've spent the last 3 months on a secondment working as a deputy ward manager, and then that secondment's just recently finished and I've gone back into my previous area, and there I'm a team leader. So it's a similar kind of role, they just call them different things in different areas. For me personally, I interviewed for a 6, I think twice before I got it. As in, I had 2 unsuccessful interviews before I got it on my 3rd one. And to be honest with you, I think that says a lot more about my interview techniques than anything else. I freak out in interviews, especially when I'm being interviewed by people that know me. So when I was applying for newly qualified jobs, I did really well in most of those because I was applying for areas that didn't know me. And if I did really badly in that interview and I didn't get the job, then I would never see those people again. So I think almost that, you know, I don't care what happens attitude makes me do better in interviews. But because the band 6 position that I went for was working in the area that I worked in since I was qualified, I knew the people interviewing me and I care what they think about me. And it just made me completely fall apart in my interviews. But actually, I'm really glad that I did it, because A, it showed my place of work that I was really keen to develop, and it meant that even though I wasn't successful in those interviews, I was given kind of a little bit of extra responsibility and things to help me work towards becoming a 6, and it helped me understand what they were looking for in the interview process. So I would say if you go for a band 6 position and you don't get it, don't let it knock your confidence. Treat it as interview experience and develop from it, so next time you go for a 6, you're more likely to get it. Just because you weren't successful at interview doesn't necessarily mean that you wouldn't be good for that role. Some people just interview better than others. For me personally, I think I would have made a good team leader the very first time I went for the interview, otherwise I wouldn't have gone for it. I clearly just wasn't very good at putting that across in an interview setting. And that's okay, everyone has different skills. Clearly, I'm just not that great at being interviewed by people that know me. In fact, when I got my deputy ward manager role on the secondment for 3 months, that was the first time I went for a band 6 position, being interviewed by people I didn't know because it was in the same trust as mine, but a different area. And that was the first band 6 interview I was successful at. And that was an acting up role. So shortly after that, I then interviewed for a permanent band 6 where I now work. And then I was successful that time. I think just doing well that time just kind of gave me that confidence boost to do well in my own area, which meant that rather than stepping back down to a 5 after my secondment ended, I got to obviously stay as a 6. So yeah, I'm rambling a little bit. What I was kind of talking about is whether or not you're ready. I think it's going to be different for everyone. I think some people might be ready for a band 6, a year after qualifying. I've met some nurses that have been qualified, 4 or 5 years, and I still don't necessarily think they've got the skills required to be a band 6. Some of it's skills based and experience based, and some of it's just our, innate qualities and personal abilities. So equally, if you are one of those people that's been qualified for quite a long time and just can't seem to make that jump to a 6, please don't be disheartened. If at any point you are unsuccessful for an interview, it's worth asking the interviewer how you can improve for next time, because that's how you get better. Speak to them, see if there's anything they can suggest, any areas of development for you to work on, and bring it up in supervision. Speak to your line manager and your clinical supervisor and find out what you can be doing to develop and kind of give yourself a bit of like a personal plan. The next thing I wanted to talk about was my band 6 interviews. As I said, I've had, sort of 4 now, 2 which were unsuccessful and 2 that were successful. Obviously, I can only speak about inpatient mental health band 6 interviews, but I think the key sort of takeaway from that jump from band 5 to band 6 is just thinking that next step further. So for example, in a band 5 interview, you might have a scenario-based question and it'll be like how you deal with the immediate situation. So a safeguarding thing, for example. It's all about, keeping the person safe and then making sure it's reported to the right people to follow up with in the future. As a band 6, it's your role to take that, one step further, thinking about supervision and training needs for the staff involved, debriefing people if it's been a particularly difficult situation, following up with the safeguarding team, making sure you're getting information back from them. Again, if it was part of a serious incident, you might need to do sort of like 3-day reviews. It's just that next step further. As a band 5, you're dealing with the immediate situation. As a 6, you're looking at it from a wider perspective and thinking about how you can make sure it doesn't happen again. And another really key thing that came through in all my interviews was this idea of sort of managing teams and managing people, because people are complicated. It's in our nature. And sometimes you're going to work with people that might be on performance management plans because they're not doing things quite as they should. Some of the management kind of stuff might involve sickness and disciplinary issues, which are not nice things to deal with. They're really not. But it is an important factor in being a band 6 because your role is to support the ward manager. And sometimes that means having really quite difficult conversations with staff. Another thing that I always try and bring up in my band 6 interviews as well is kind of like that team ethos and that team well-being aspect, because that's something that management really look at. They want to think about how can we make sure we've got a positive attitude and a positive ethos within our team. Because let's be honest, there can at times be a real negative culture in the NHS, a bit of nurses eat their young, and high stress, high burnout. So try and demonstrate in your interview how you are going to lead your team, how you're going to be a positive role model within your team as that band 6 that band 5s and junior staff can look up to. What are you going to do to build that really good sort of team working attitude? Raise morale, raise standards so that you're all working in a positive environment. And then the final thing I wanted to touch upon in this video is my personal experience of kind of making that transition, because let's be honest, it was a bit scary. Even though I thought I was ready, otherwise, like I said, I wouldn't have applied for it if I didn't think I was ready. There's always that little doubt in the back of your mind. And I've worked with some incredible band 6 nurses, and all I wanted to do was sort of live up to their standards. And actually that's one of the best piece of advice that one of our senior management gave me for my interview, was to think about the really great qualities that some of our band 6 nurses have where I work, and think about how I'd want to incorporate the best bits of them, but in my own way. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, so-and-so's just so good at her job. What if everyone thinks, oh, well, Chloe's the bad team leader or Chloe's the bad deputy ward manager compared to so-and-so. And it's really funny because when I introduced myself to the consultant on the ward that I was on my secondment on, I introduced myself as, I'm Chloe, I'm one of the nurses. And my ward manager was in the room at the time and she went, no, you're not. She was like, you're deputy ward manager. And I was like, oh, yeah, I am. And it took me a little while for me to introduce myself in that way, because for a good few weeks I kept introducing myself as a staff nurse, and other people kept correcting me, being like, no, you're not Chloe. But to be honest with you, I had a similar thing when I first qualified. To call myself a nurse as opposed to a student nurse was quite a difficult thing for me to do initially, and it took me a few weeks. I kept correcting myself, and I think once you get into the swing of things and you start getting positive feedback from the people working with you, then you kind of seem to go, right, okay, I can do this. I am a good band 6. I've got this. I feel like I have learned so much in, like I said, the 4 months that I've been a band 6, because there's just so much going on that I had no idea as a band 5. I just wasn't involved in that side of things, and I didn't have to think about, you know, the audits and the supervision and all that kind of stuff. Like, I just didn't think about it. I did what I was told and I made sure I was doing my job properly, but now I've got to make sure that all the nurses working with me are doing their job properly too. I definitely feel like I had a bit of like imposter syndrome when I first got my 6, particularly being quite young as well. I often really worry that I'm going to get judged. As I said, some nurses do believe that you need to have been qualified longer in order to be a band 6, and I, you know, respect their opinion, but I genuinely believe I'm good at my job, otherwise I wouldn't have gone for it. But it doesn't stop these little kind of niggling thoughts in the back of your mind, like, oh my god, how have I managed to convince people I can do this, because I can't do this. And again, that really kind of resonates with how I felt as a newly qualified nurse, thinking, you know, how have I managed to convince people to let me qualify as a nurse? Like, I can't do this, but I could, and you can. After my 3 months of convent had ended and I went back into my sort of old area, I started on a new ward. So it was within the same unit, but on a new ward. It's really hard to explain without explaining where I work, but obviously I don't want to do that for privacy reasons. So yeah, it was within the same unit, but a different ward. But I didn't know a lot of the staff there previously. I'd done a few bank shifts there, including dealing with some really challenging incidents. And the first day I was on this new ward, one of the nurses was like, oh my god, I'm so glad it's you that's come over as our team leader. And actually she's one of the people that I was really worried about, because she is someone that's been qualified for quite a long time, and I know she went for a band 6 about 6 months ago and didn't get it. So I was really worried that she was going to kind of hold that against me. You know, why is this nurse that's been qualified for 3 years less than me good enough for a band 6 and I'm not? And I was so worried what she was going to think of me. But she turned around on my first day and was like, I'm so glad it's you coming over as our team leader. And she mentioned one of the really challenging bank shifts I'd had, and how she just really loved how I'd handled it, and how all the staff spoke really highly of both how I'd handled it, but also how I'd supported them through it. And it was just that moment of, okay, I can do this. Like, people don't think I'm terrible at my job. And now I am so glad I kind of made that leap of faith. And I think it would have been so easy for me to let those first sort of 2 unsuccessful interviews completely knock my confidence. But if that happens to you, I think you just need to frame it in the mindset of, this is a learning experience. How can I develop from this? How can I do better? But also thinking about the strengths you've already got and how you can play up those strengths. Because actually that's one of the questions that the people that interviewed me said I always did worse on, which was the questions around, you know, why you're good for the job and what you can bring to the role. Don't sell yourself short. And yeah, the thing that I want you to take away from this video is that it's not as scary as you probably think it's going to be making that jump. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, and of course hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And as I said, all the links for Nurses.co.uk will be down below, and I will see you again next time.